Hello again. This is the second part of the Personalizing an Avatar series that I'm doing, where in the first one we learned how to find the materials on an avatar, play with them, change the colors, and add a little bit of procedural texture to them if they don't have them. But that one worked with an avatar that didn't already have textures. Most avatars come with textures, and in this tutorial I'm going to be explaining with this example how to handle personalizing something that already has a very set in stone UV mapped texture. I already have the inspector open for this one, and I have a dev tip here. You, as defined in the first part, just go ahead and find centered root and go to the one part that has the skinned mesh renderer on it. For this one, it has just like a single skin mesh renderer with 3 materials on here. They're all Xixxy's Toon. I'm just going to pull those out. This one would be the main body texture. The second one is going to be, I believe, the hoodie. Yeah. So you can kind of tell. One easy way, if you're not entirely sure, just by looking at like the main texture that it has on here, you can do like I'm doing and just mess with the color and see what changes. If it isn't obvious then maybe it's not worth messing with. So this one is the hair specifically. So 3 materials. What I'm going to be playing with right now is this one right here, which is the main skin, or fur in this case. So in this case, you have this avatar, it has textures on it, and you want to change the color. Since this color starts as gray and like you want it to be red, it doesn't really work very well. Your first instinct may be to just get rid of the texture entirely and then play with it, but that's pretty cursed. So if that isn't what you want, then I can explain a few ways in progressing like difficulty or involvement, how to combat something like that. The first thing I'm going to explain is just looking at the texture. So when you grab the texture itself, you can pull the trigger and you'll get this cute little object that is the texture, and you can keep that with you someplace. But you also get this big old panel that essentially just represents all of the information about the texture. The URL is just like this long, weird string thing that represents the information, but some other things like standard filter mode and like wrap modes and all these weird things, the size is particularly useful to know. But what we're interested in is these specific components come with very interesting procedures that you can work on them. There are only a few that I'm going to go over on this long list that are useful for what we're trying to do, but you can play with all of them. Go ahead and feel free to just play with them, because anytime you do one of them, you can just do undo, and it will undo whatever you're doing. So you don't have to feel bad about like, oh, I might break this. You can always just undo it, as long as your undo history isn't broken. So as an example on this one, the first one is just invert RGB, so I'm going to click that and let it go. The size of the texture is going to increase the amount of time it takes for these to go. So if you have like some 4K textures or 2K textures, then it's going to take a little bit longer. I think 4K specifically has the longest time. 2K is not that bad. So in this case, you can see it changed all of the colors just magically. What it did was invert all of the colors, so everything that was once like red is now cyan, or green is now purple, or the other way around. It essentially just takes all the numbers that represent the colors and flips it to the opposite representation, which is the direct operation of 1 minus x. It's kind of technical. It's I basically mentioned that because if you're not used to playing with colors in a technical aspect with numbers and stuff, then it can get kind of confusing what you're doing. But the premise is just to play with it. So the more you can play with it, the more you'll like get an understanding of what's going on. The easiest part to do this is just like play with it. Invert R is what I'm doing right now, where we'll take the red channel for everything and kind of swap it out. Essentially what happens is everything that was once black is now very red. Essentially that means like everywhere there wasn't a lot of red, there is now a lot of red, and the other way around. That obviously looks grotesque. Well, depends on what theme you're going for. But let's say that's not what we're going for. There are a few of the ones down here that are very useful for what you're going to want if you want like refined control. Specifically, in relation to what we were doing earlier, is swap RNG, swap RNB, and swap G and B, which basically just means take whatever's in one channel and put it into another channel. So like if I want all of the red to suddenly be green, then I can click that, and then it will move all the red into the green, and all the green will now be in the red. And that typically is a better operation because it preserves what the values and things typically are, like across the texture. See, there's not like a crazy color change, it's just kind of, it respects a lot of what's already there. It doesn't dramatically change anything. So doing that is worthwhile. It can swap things out and make it interesting. We can do the same with R and B here. I'm doing R red with all the other ones because this one's a pink, and pink is has a lot of red in it, so it's a more significant change. So if I like swapped green and blue in this case, it probably wouldn't do a lot that's immediately noticeable. I could be wrong though. So yeah, now we have like this interesting color that's going on. So that's one thing you can do. You can also do these three down here: hue, gamma, and, well, I guess longest side changes the size of the texture. So like, I'm actually going to do that really quick. Just gonna reduce the size. That will reduce the fidelity. You don't necessarily need that. You would probably want to keep it the same, but this just makes it so that like I'm not waiting for years in this video just doing operations. The operations will be a lot faster. So real quick, hue just basically represents like it will take this hue value. It defaults to 0.1, but it will do like it'll basically rotate it. So like around the color wheel, let me snag a color wheel real quick. So around the color wheel, it'll basically like one full rotation. So if you do 0.5, it'll rotate it around halfway. So say like this is around like purple or something, maybe like down here. Then if I do a hue shift of 0.5, then it should bring it up to like this yellowish green. So let's actually test that really quick. If I do hue 0.5, then do shift hue, then it is this yellowish green. So you can use that as well to have more fine-tuned control over just the colors if you don't want to like start swapping the channels around. This is a more intuitive way of playing with it. I'll actually undo that because I liked the purple. The second one is adjust gamma, which gamma is a lesser known version of like contrast. It's like contrast and brightness, but it's not quite the same. Gamma has similar effects though. It defaults at this weird number of 2.2, probably because it's like gamma is like mathematically speaking, a very exponential curve sort of thing. It's wonky, but basically you just like the higher the number, the more contrast. I can do 2.2 and adjust the gamma. And now the purple colors are now all a lot darker and the whites stay pretty white. I can actually undo and redo to see just what kind of effect that had. It actually looks kind of nice typically because higher contrast is nicer to look at. But at that point, let's say none of these colors are working for me. What if I just want like a grayscale sort of thing? The last one that I really enjoy using is convert to grayscale, which is just above all the swaps. You can click that, and it'll take everything that's currently there and grayscale it. Very useful, especially if you want to do like going back to the original material here. If you want to then have more control just using the color value that's underneath here and kind of doing that. Obviously, that still looks bad, but what you do in conjunction with that is you can now take your main texture that is black and white and put it into the emissive map on whatever material you're doing. And instead of using that color, we'll just cancel that, you can use the emissive color. And that can typically give you some better looking results because it doesn't paint the entire thing the same color. Obviously the emissive is emissive, so it won't react with lighting, or it'll look like really bright, kind of like right now since we're outside. So maybe all that isn't what you want. Maybe you want really fine-tuned control, and just as a contrived example, you want the eyes to be a very interesting color, but the rest of it is just grayscale. So typically, at that point, since the operations I mentioned previously are more for the entire texture, you wouldn't be able to do that with those operations because it would apply everything to the same, like, everything. But there is one thing that I figured is kind of a hack. It's a little hacky. I would recommend, if you have the ability to, just go outside of Neos and use like an external program like GIMP or Photoshop. But there's a way to do it if you're willing to within Neos, where you basically like, I can explain it to you because I have the example over here. I'll just swap the camera over. Basically, we use Neotoshop from the Polylogics team. This is kind of like their recreation of like Photoshop, as you can kind of guess by the name. We can use this to basically take a picture of our texture, draw on it, and then export it again. That might sound pretty janky because it is, but there's ways to reduce the jankiness that I will explain. Real quick, basically what you need is a dev tip and the texture in question. So I'm going to snag those real quick outside the camera. Here we go. So, I think it's fine. So you have your texture, you have the dev tip, and you have your Neotoshop. So this is how it spawns in typically, the Neotoshop. I'm going to real quick inspect and then open the inspector. You'll probably end up, like if you aim directly at the white screen here, you'll end up in some place called Snapper with some like logics on it. You go up and you'll be in Strokes Layer. Strokes Layer is a pretty good place for this because we just want to inspect a spot where the object will render the texture, and we want to put the texture into that spot. So you'll find Strokes Layer if you don't end up in a spot like that. I think it's like if you're in the root, then you just go down to like Drawing Layers, Strokes Layer, and then you can click that, go down here and make sure we're in here. So then at that point you have that, move that over here. You can then inspect your little texture example, open that up, and you can grab that, and basically I want, you have to be careful about grabbing things around Neotoshop because it'll slap it onto the little brush grid over there. But you can basically, hold on, let me make this bigger enough for you. So essentially, you take your texture and you parent it underneath Strokes Layer. And you can keep this over here somewhere. You'll need it later. Then, while you still have the texture object inspected, this guy, you can reset the position, rotation, and scale all at once, which is these three buttons up here. Do that, that, and that. So now, it's actually physically behind the object being rendered. So that's good. But it's not quite fitting the entire square. It's just kind of like a small amount of it. The way we can fix that is still within this inspector. The last thing you have to do is scroll down to the quad mesh component, which is like its physical portion. And you see the size is like this weird 0.7 thing. You can just grab a 1, put in there, normalize it, make it 1 to 1, and now it fits perfectly. One last bit for that, you don't actually need your inspector for that anymore, but you can come over to down here with tint on the background. This little thing will pop out, and the gray slider is the alpha, the transparency. You just want to put that all the way to the end. So now you have a fully transparent background, which is represented by the gray and white checkerboard. And that typically is where you're done, although one thing you want to be careful of is the export resolution, which is also right down here. It defaults at 1K texture, which is great, but if I hadn't resized this texture to be 1K, then I would want to increase the export size so that I don't get any loss. Just kind of keeping it the same size as it was. You can change the little resolution button to be like, or resolution number to be either 2 for a 2K texture or 4 for a 4K texture. Other than that, you're good to go. At this point, we have essentially imported our texture into Neotoshop. And at this point, you just kind of have to draw on it. How you draw on it is kind of tricky, but one way I like to do that is grabbing, with the dev tip, creating a new material, and then going to filters. And channel matrix is going to give you the most control over any sort of color changes you're going to do. It's a very involved material though, very strange looking, has a lot of stuff going on, but it's okay, I'll walk you through it. Just keep this filter looking orb somewhere where you know you can see it. And to start, before we play with this, I'm just going to tell you how to paint the effect onto here. It's pretty simple. Just you can grab this brush specifically, not the one that's undulating. That's a convex hull brush. You can use that, but this one's a little bit more intuitive for painting. Actually, yeah, you can definitely use either one. For this one, I'm just going to use this because I'm crazy. The default for this, if you didn't see what I did, I just put the brush into the material and it'll pick it up as a sort of material there. The defaults for this aren't easy to see on these things, so what you can do is just go to I like going to the red offset, or one of the offsets, and just increasing it to 1, so now it just looks red all the time, no matter what it's on top of, so it's easier to see. What we wanted to do was change the color of the eye. The eye is on this part of the texture up here. So what I can do is just kind of go up here. It'll give you a little circle that's probably hard to see on your end, where you're about to paint, so you can just kind of paint over that. And make sure you do this in one stroke, especially with these filter materials. If you draw several strokes on top of each other, then it will cascade and kind of combine the effects into something that isn't very well controlled and probably won't look very good. So once you just kind of color over the space, you're good. You don't need to paint anymore, but now we can play with the values and things. Essentially, what this material specifically does is takes colors from other channels like red, green, and blue, and you can shove them into the other channels, or just kind of like make a minimum or a maximum. This is kind of a very technical thing, but the benefit with this is, like the other stuff, you can just play with it and see what happens. You can do a bunch of red from red. Let me actually set the offset. Like I mentioned before, the offsets just give you free colors. Just kind of make sure we're keeping an eye on the eye up there, because that's where the effect's happening. You can add some blue from green, which basically just like takes from the green channel whatever's supposed to be green, make it blue too. Same thing with like green from red, whatever's supposed to be red, make it green as well. If you combine enough of them, then they'll probably like start looking white or stuff, but if you zero everything, oops, not the offsets, you have to be careful which ones you reduce. Keep all the offsets the same, and just kind of like reduce all that. Wait, did I miss one? I did. My bad. So, red offset, green offset, blue offset. Oh, here we go. Wait. Oh, here we go. So, if I put everything down to 0 aside from the offsets, then it's completely black. If I want some red from red, then it's only red. If I want green from green, then it's only green. And if I want blue, then I just get blue. So having it exactly like this, it has zero effect. It just takes like everything that's normal. And it doesn't have any effect on it. But I can add some additional, let's say I want green eyes. So I'll do green from blue as well. So I'll take some from the blue and make some more green. Since our texture is grayscale, there's no dramatic effect. It's just like an even amount across everything. It's just like adding some of the blue that would be white and making it more like pushing it into the green. I can also take green from red, which has the exact same effect, but now we basically have white plus a lot of green. So that typically has a lot of control for what you're going for. There are also a bunch of, you can try out all the other filters and see how they affect colors and things like that. But let's say we're done, just for the sake of time. I'm great, I have my texture all done. All I have to do at this point is keep everything the same, don't delete anything yet, but go to export up here and just click it, and it will up at the, I think kind of like up there, it'll spawn, yeah. It spawns this object once it's done, and it's a texture. The one thing you have to do, that I would recommend you do, move that down there, is that these textures export very specifically with a filter type that's called point, which basically just like means it's not smooth or anything, it's just all pixels, which makes sense for it, but it doesn't make sense for an avatar. So you can go ahead and inspect this new object, open it up, it'll be called Neotoshop export, and right here at static texture 2D, this is the exact same component we were playing with before. We can go to the filter mode and check to the right. Now it's bilinear. Things typically default to bilinear, so this is something you can play with, but bilinear is a really good place to start there. So now we're done. We can move over to our original avatar, which I'll swap the camera over to real quick, and bring our new little texture. And keep the colors the same, make sure everything's all tidy, and we can just grab this and put it into here. So it's probably a little hard to see, but I'll move over to smooth POV really quick just so you can get a good look. And right here we have our grayscale fur texture, but the eyes are green, just like we intended. And there we go. That's basically the most advanced textured playing that you'll have to do in Neos. I'm pretty sure there won't be anything else as like a problem that you'll have with a texture on an avatar that won't be solved with something like that. It's a weird process, but it will give you anything. Like I said, like you won't have any problems if you default to one of those things that you can do. In the next part of these series, I'm going to be going to a little bit more advanced thing where like I'll have an example or a few examples of specific things that are like logics based, where you might want to add like a chameleon effect to your colors on your materials, or some other like very technical logics based things. If there's something you do want to see, feel free to let me know in the Discord, and because I don't have any ideas for what I'm going to do in that video yet. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, again, just contact me in Discord, and I'll see you in the next video.